About 2 years ago, my friends and I had found out about an abandoned insane asylum located in Downey, California. Being the curious 17-year-olds that we were, we decided it would be a good idea to explore this abandoned facility just to see what we could find inside. So on a Saturday night, we gathered a few more of our friends and we made the drive out to Downey so we could explore this building for ourselves. After about 30 minutes of driving, we arrived in Downey and made our way through the city to where the asylum is located. The closer we get, the shadier and shadier the neighborhoods we were passing through became. And after about another 15 minutes of driving, we arrived at our destination. We parked the car, climbed through a hole in the fence, and made our way into the building to see what we could find. To be honest, it started out not being too bad. Considering we had about 10 people, we were thinking, what's the worst that could happen to a group of 10 people? So we meandered through the building, looking at all the broken furniture scattered throughout the rooms. There were patient files thrown upon the floor, and the whole place was as messy as you would imagine. But nonetheless, we were pretty much just having a good time, looking around the weird and abandoned mental institution. But this is where things start to get weird. As we were walking, we of course had a flashlight pointed down the hallway because the power that was once on in this building was and is clearly still out. But as we were walking with our flashlight pointed ahead of us and we came to a corner, we see the adjacent wall of the corner light up from what we assumed was another flashlight. And sure enough, we turn the corner and there's another group of 4 kids. We confront each other and they asked us if we've been to the slide. We politely answered no because we had no idea what they were talking about, and they told us that we should follow them. Of course, we declined because we were getting weird vibes from these people. As they were talking amongst themselves, one of the kids came up to me with, I kid you not, a solid 6-inch long Bowie knife looking thing. Isn't this cool? Look what I found. As he moves the knife closer to my face. I politely answer, what a cool find that is. I started to back away from him, telling him that we were going to explore the roof of the building. Surprisingly, they say alright, and they turned the corner and continued on their way. We made it to the roof, but I was starting to feel queasy about everything. I was seriously beginning to feel weird about being in this place and about how we were definitely not supposed to be there. So at that point, I say screw it. I told everyone that we should leave, and everybody agreed. Like I said, no one is supposed to be in the asylum, so most of the time, especially at night, they have a police car stationed at the main gate to make sure no one comes in. So as we were leaving, we were trying to figure out the best path to get out of there without getting noticed by the police. That's when my friend sees a fire escape ladder coming down off of this higher portion of the roof. We decide that is probably our best bet. So we grabbed the small ladder and we positioned it in such a way that my friend Jonah could climb up it. Jonah then immediately turned around so he could help us out by pulling each of us up. As I was getting myself up there, my heart dropped to the bottom of my stomach. Jonah, did you not see this when you got up here? I whispered. What the heck are you talking about, man? He responds. I'm looking forward and he slowly turns to see what was pretty much our worst nightmare. There were about 15 hooded people sitting in a circle up there, surrounding a burning cat and many other dead animals. These people were talking in tongues and just making these noises that seemed satanic. As we were both climbing back down the ladder, we get noticed by them and they start talking amongst themselves in this weird language, and before we knew it, these people stood up and started sprinting towards us. I told everyone to ditch the idea of the fire escape and to not worry about the cop and that we just needed to get the hell out of there. So we started sprinting through this building with this cult or whatever you want to call them, in close pursuit behind us. We surprisingly made it out of the building and started running across the field to the main gate, and as we were doing so, the cop notices all the commotion and turns on his sirens and came driving towards us. Thank God he managed to cut the cult off from us and started to chase them as we ran away safely. Honestly, I can say this was the scariest experience of my life. What would we have done if they had taken one of our friends? Would we have had to go back in and confront them? Well, I don't know, and I'm glad we didn't have to. My name is Michael, and this is a story about me, my friends Jacob, Jigger, and Jeremiah. The story starts off smack dab in the middle of 2019 with Jacob and I. In 2019, me and my friend Jacob found this abandoned house when we were driving around on a dirt road one night. Exploring abandoned houses was what we liked to do, and it was kind of our thing at the time, so we got excited when we found this house. We decided to come back the next day in the daytime to check it out so we could see better. And that way we could look at everything there and then come back during the night so we would have a good feel for everything. This is what we usually did when we found a new abandoned house to look at. Anyways, the next day we went driving around trying to find it, and we couldn't find it for the life of us. We just decided to forget about it, and we agreed that we would find another house. Fast forward to the summer of 2020, I was bored of just sitting at home, so I decided to go out and try to find that house we wanted to check out months prior. After about an hour of just driving down the dirt roads, making a countless amount of turns, I finally stumbled upon the house. I had finally found it. I texted my friend Jacob right away about it so we could go back there later that day when he got off work. When we finally got there, our faces lit up with the same excitement that we had when we first found it. It was a decent looking house for being abandoned. It just had a few broken windows and tall grass around the property. We went through the back door and we had to go through some branches to get inside, and when we finally made it in and we looked around the house, we were surprised. It still looked nice in there. It was a basic 2-story house and it had a finished basement. We mainly only checked out the first floor because we didn't want to be parked out there for too long, just in case we got spotted by a cop or just someone driving around that would snitch on us. There wasn't really much on the first floor, except for maybe some broken glass scattered around, and a few different items on the floor, and a nice chandelier in the living room area. After getting some pictures and looking at the place, we planned to come back around midnight with a couple of friends to make it more fun. Around 11:30, we picked up our friends Jigger and Jeremiah and we headed back to the house. When we got inside, we did exactly what you would think a group of teenage boys would do. We were probably being loud and obnoxious, and we were definitely trying to scare each other, and we were mostly just roughhousing and being crazy. We made our way upstairs and we spent some time looking around the rooms. At this point, we had been there for over 30 minutes and there really wasn't much to see in the house, so we decided it was time to leave. As we were deciding who should lead the way down the stairs, first we were joking around about how someone would be around the corner waiting for us or something. Just dumb stuff. I decided to go first because I wasn't scared. But as I was going down slowly, we heard a loud crash on the main floor. We just stood there, all shocked, staring at each other. My first thought was that Jeremiah was behind this because he was known for doing stuff like this. But there is no way it could have been him though, because I quickly remembered that he was behind me and that simply just wouldn't make any sense. After a few seconds of us all standing still, I slowly made my way downstairs to the main floor. No one was there, and there was nothing on the floor that looked like it fell. I thought it would have been the chandelier, but it was still hanging from the ceiling. We all just decided to book it and get out of there as fast as possible. We all ran to the car, and as we were getting in the car, a big gray SUV pulled up right next to us. My heart dropped. We hurried in, and my friend Jacob, who was driving, rolled down his window to try and see what was going on. "Hey," Jacob yelled at whoever was in the car. Then, both the driver's window and the driver's side passenger window rolled down at the same time. "Oh no," Jacob whispered. Then with no hesitation, Jacob put the car in drive and sped out of there. As we started driving down the street, I asked Jacob what he saw, and what he said still gives me the chills. He said when the guy rolled down the window, he saw 5 guys, 2 in the front and 3 in the back, and that all of them had baseball bats or some type of weapon in their hands. As we were speeding down the dark road, headlights started speeding up behind us, and it was the same SUV. They were so close to us that if Jacob were to even tap on the brakes, they would have hit us. Jacob picked up the pace and floored it. There was a highway up ahead of us, so we merged onto it, and we were going nearly 100 miles per hour. After a couple of minutes of them following us, we saw them turn their car around, and they started heading in the other direction. We turned off the highway, stopped the car, and regained our thoughts. We sat there in silence, and we waited for a few minutes until we got back on the highway to head back to that house to see if the car was still there. As we were parked across from the house, realizing that the car wasn't there that chased us, we started talking amongst ourselves about what just happened. And then, Jeremiah's phone started to ring. It was his girlfriend, and what she said made us all look at each other in fear. "Did you guys go to that one abandoned house that one kid got killed at?" Me and Jacob looked at each other with wide eyes, and then I looked back at Jigger and Jeremiah. To keep the phone call short, she said that the house used to be known as an abandoned party house for teens, and that the owner of the property saw a party going on there one time, because he had cameras set up that were hidden in the house. And when the owner got there, he shot one of the kids at the party and killed him. Jeremiah asked her how she knew we were there, and she said she saw his location from his phone, and she said she knew where that house was because she said that she had been there before. They finished their conversation, and Jacob took everybody home one by one. Later that night when I was home, sitting in my bed, there was a lot I was thinking about. What was that noise that we all heard in the house? And who were all those guys in that car? And why did they chase us? I can't get over thinking that if we would have stayed in that house for even just a minute longer, that things would have went a lot worse for us. It's been 2 years since then, and Jacob and I still think about that night from time to time. And I also can't think of any solution to what that noise was that we all heard when we were in the house walking down the stairs. I don't know if it was something paranormal, but I haven't explored any abandoned homes since that night, nor do I ever plan on doing so again. I'm currently 17 years old, and I live with my parents still. Next door, there is an abandoned house that has been abandoned since we have lived in this neighborhood. We have lived here for just under 2 years now. We live in kind of a rough part of town, and abandoned homes are very common around here. I didn't really like the idea of living next to an abandoned home because it was sort of creepy, but really, I didn't care that much, and I would hardly ever think about it. However, there were a few times that I can think of specifically where I could have sworn I heard something coming from that house. I thought maybe they were squatters, so I decided to mind my own business. Have you ever heard of that saying, curiosity killed the cat? Well, I figured as long as they weren't bothering anybody that it was probably best to stay away from the situation altogether. Well, one hot summer night, I couldn't sleep, so I lied awake all night, tossing and turning, trying my best to get some shut-eye. When all of a sudden, I heard screaming that sounded like it came from the abandoned house. It only lasted a few seconds, but I panicked, and thinking back, I can't believe that I did this. And I truly have no idea what the hell I was thinking, and I don't blame you if you think I'm stupid. But I grabbed my switchblade that my father gave me as a birthday present one year, and I quietly snuck out of my window and made my way over to the house. I had to jump a fence and get through some bushes, and I did so as quietly as possible so I wouldn't be heard or spotted by anyone. I crept my way up the back porch and I opened the sliding glass door slowly, and to my surprise, it was actually unlocked. My heart was pretty much beating out of my chest by this point, and I even almost turned around and went home. But I didn't. I should have though, and I wish I would have just called the police instead and let them figure it out. I made my way inside, and right off the bat, I could see just how dark it was. I pulled my iPhone out and I turned the flashlight on so that way I could see at least what was in front of me. That was a bad move on my part because almost as soon as I turned my flashlight on, it startled someone, and he made his way over to me. I was standing in the living room with my back up against the wall, waiting for whoever it was to walk past me, and I turned my flashlight off. I'm almost 100% sure that whoever it was noticed I was there because of my light. The person turned the corner and I was met with a much larger man than myself, and immediately he punched me in my face, and then he grabbed me by my arm and my shirt and began dragging me. My survival instinct kicked in and I did everything I could to break free of him. He then opened a door and I realized right away he was trying to put me down in the basement. I managed to kick him in the balls and I pushed him down the stairs and I ran like hell out of the house and all the way home. I snuck back into my window and shut it and locked it as fast as I could. I didn't think anyone else saw me, so that helped me feel a little better. I rushed to make sure that both the front and back door were locked as well. I then called my mom and she told me to get the police over there as soon as possible. I hung up the phone call with my mom and I dialed 911 and I told them what was going on and that they needed to send an officer over pronto. They told me to keep an eye on the home while I waited for the police to get there, so I did. I looked out of our living room window and that's when I saw the creepiest thing I have ever seen in my whole 17 years of living. There was a man staring out of the window looking directly at me in that abandoned house. I could barely see what he looked like, but I assumed that it was probably the man I had just pushed down the stairs. We made eye contact for probably 10 seconds before he shut the blinds and he disappeared from the window. By now I was even more terrified that he was going to come for me. I hid in my room and I waited for the police. I was really hoping that he would still be there when the police arrived, but with my luck, he was already long gone by the time the cops showed up. I wasn't surprised by that at all, only I was freaked out that he was going to come back for revenge. The police didn't find anyone or anything suspicious in the house either, which makes this whole thing even creepier. What the hell was going on in there that night and all of the other nights I heard noises coming from that house? I have not a single clue and I probably won't ever know. I can't imagine it's anything good. My grandparents' home has been broken into a total of 3 times in the past 30 years since they have lived there. They live in the smack dab middle of nowhere, so it'd be much easier to get away with this sort of thing for people that wanted to target their house specifically. They live on a long dirt road that stretches for 25 miles at least, into what feels like endless amounts of emptiness, and the occasional few houses every quarter mile. 90% of what you would see if you were on your way to my grandparents' house would be endless amounts of cornfields. I used to stay the night there 2 to 3 times a week when I was a kid, because I loved going over there. Something I want to mention is how creepy it is at nighttime though, at my grandma's. I always thought I was weird for this growing up, but a more simple way I could describe the area was that it reminded me of Courage the Cowardly Dog. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure you could get the idea. It perfectly explains how desolated it felt like to be at my grandma's house, especially alone and at night. Sorry if I sound like a wuss, but because of the simple fact that their house had been broken into before, I was alone, and how unbelievably dark it would get outside kinda scared the crap out of me. I was 17 at the time, so I might have been a little old to be scared like that. But I guarantee you, if you would have been in my situation, you would totally understand. If you were at my grandma's house in the middle of the night and decided to step outside, you would barely see anything. There are no street lights at all, and the only light in the whole entire area comes from my grandpa's pole barn. But the light is so dim and it barely helps. All it does is add to the eeriness, if I'm being honest. I used to smoke weed back then when I was a teenager, and I knew I would have to go outside out of respect for my grandparents if I wanted to get high. They would have been pretty upset if they knew I would have been smoking in the first place, so I wasn't going to do it in their house. It was around 6 p.m. the first time I smoked for the day. I walked outside, stared at the sunset on the porch, ripped my bowl, and enjoyed the last bit of sunlight I had left. I got myself pretty high, like higher than I intended, but it was all good. I went back inside, grabbed some snacks, unpacked my bag, grabbed my Xbox, and started playing Halo with my friends on Xbox Live. We played for about 2.5 hours, but my friends had to get off the game, so I ended up quitting as well. I get bored quickly when I play video games alone, so I decided it was time to smoke again. as the effects of the weed were completely gone by now. I took a step outside and realized it was pitch black. I didn't realize how fast time had passed. I didn't like the idea of being at my grandma's at night by myself so much, but I knew it was coming and I couldn't stop the inevitable. So I pretty much said screw it and dealt with it. This time though, I smoked right by the garage door, only a step or maybe 2 steps from the door outside. I hit my bowl probably 5 times and got distracted by my girlfriend because she texted me. I stood there texting her for maybe a couple of minutes, and I suppose I was sort of zoned out because I forgot that I was standing in my grandparents' driveway outside. I took my last few hits and took myself back inside. As I was packing up my little smoker's kit that I had that helped diminish the smell of my weed that I kept in my backpack, right as I opened the door, I heard some rustling in the leaves to the left of me in my grandparents' woods. It spooked me so bad at first, I ran inside right away. I calmed myself down and I told myself that I was just being paranoid and that I was obviously an animal or something. My grandparents own over 3 acres of property and most of it is woods. It wouldn't be too far-fetched for it to be a deer or a bunny or something like that. I ran through the garage that is attached to my grandma's house, locked both doors, and ran inside. As I was walking through the kitchen and towards the living room, I heard a knocking sound come from the front living room window. I peeked through the blinds to see what was going on, and there was a man dressed in an all-black body morph suit staring directly at me, maybe about 15 feet away from the house in the front yard. He stood there for only a couple of seconds and then he started running in my direction. I ran and grabbed a phone and a kitchen knife as quick as I could. I called my grandma, but she didn't answer. I dialed 911 and I was debating if I should call. That's right when I heard the man smash through the glass sliding door window on the back patio. I ran to my grandparents' room and hid under their bed. I called the cops and I was whispering as quiet as I possibly could to the dispatcher so the intruder couldn't hear me. I heard the man making his way through the house, and he was getting closer and closer each second. It got to the point to where he was so close that I had to stop talking just in case he were to hear me. I waited until I felt like it was safe, and I told the dispatcher the address quietly as possible. I told them I couldn't speak and that there was someone who just broke into my house and that they need to send someone now. 3 officers arrived on scene in less than 10 minutes. I heard police sirens and I heard them all storm through the house looking for the man. I screamed to let them know my location and I hid the knife behind me, and then they helped me out from under the bed once they knew I was the person who called. The man was nowhere to be found either, which scared the hell out of me. I drove home immediately when the cops left, and I called my grandparents again the next morning. I told them what happened and they rushed home straight away. It's safe to say I will never be staying in my grandma's house again, and if I ever even consider it, I most definitely won't be staying there alone. The man didn't steal anything either, so I'm not sure what his plan was. Maybe he got scared and had second thoughts about what he was doing. I'm not sure, and I probably won't ever know for certain. I'm just going to be blunt here and not sugarcoat anything at all. My mother was an alcoholic and has been for my whole entire life as far as I'm aware. Now there's nothing wrong with having a few drinks here and there. Hell, there's nothing wrong with getting absolutely drunk off your butt either from time to time. As long as you're acting appropriate and not doing things you shouldn't be, like my mom for example. I still love her dearly because she is my mom, but she certainly screwed me up as a kid. But I'm not going to get into all of the details of that right now. I'm just going to talk about a specific night. My mom used to go out every single weekend, Friday, Saturday, and even Sunday. She would even go out once or twice, sometimes even 3 times in the middle of the week. But when she wasn't going out, 9 times out of 10 she would drink at home, either alone or with someone, like a friend. I was a very isolated child, and I lived in a very unstable home, financially, emotionally. Sometimes she would even physically abuse me as well. I was literally only 9 or 10 years old when this happened, So you have to understand, I was so young that I could barely even comprehend what was going on around me. This night in particular, I don't remember what day it was or even what time it was, but it was dark, so it was late at the very least, and it was indeed nighttime. Any time past 9 o'clock was probably considered late for me considering my age. Although I was used to staying up until 1 or 2 a.m. sometimes, just waiting for my mom to come home. I remember when my mom would leave, I would feel very sad. This night was no different. I never really got used to staying home alone either. No matter how many times she would leave me there, I would always be sad and scared. This night that I'm talking about now, she left without even telling me. The only thing I had to help with my boredom was to watch the same 3 movies over and over, and maybe play with my Legos or something. I remember I had a puzzle I could never figure out, so sometimes I would work on that when I was really bored. I was laying on the couch when I heard the home phone ring. When I answered it, I said hello, but nobody was on the other end, so I hung up. They called again, almost immediately after I hung up. This time I heard breathing in the background, but still, no voice. I hung up once again after trying to get them to talk. I figured we had bad connection or something, so when they called again, I picked it up once more. "Hey buddy, where's mommy? Can I talk to her please?" She's not home right now," I said. "Oh, okay, thanks. I will call back tomorrow," he said. He didn't call me again after that, so I went back to watching my movie, and honestly I didn't think much of it. A few minutes later, I heard knocking on the door. "Hey bud, it's Joe, please answer the door. Your mom sent me to come pick you up." Joe was my mom's junkie ex-boyfriend that did drugs with her at the time, which I was too young to understand back then. I was also too young to understand the situation at hand. He wasn't really a stranger though, so in my head, being the innocent kid that I was, I thought that I could trust him. He put me in the back seat and off we were. I asked him where we were going, to which he replied that it was a surprise. I'm sure you know this by now, but he was kidnapping me. No, my mom never told him to pick me up or anything. The craziest thing about this whole entire situation, apart from me being kidnapped, was how he got caught. A police officer pulled him over when he didn't use his blinker, I think. And that right there was when my whole life was about to change forever. The officer ended up finding drugs in Joe's car and they arrested him. The police got a hold of my mom and found out that Joe didn't have permission to pick me up as well. My mom rushed home and the police waited for her. She was absolutely obliterated from drinking too much and borderline incoherent when she got back. The cops started asking my mom and I all these questions, and my mom actually ended up getting arrested as well for neglecting me, child endangerment, having drugs on her, driving under the influence, resisting arrest, assault on an officer, and a few other things I'm sure. The police took me to my grandparents' house for the night until they could figure out what to do with me legal-wise. Well, days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. They ended up adopting me after a few months of being there, and I lived there until I was 19. I moved out last year, and I'm currently attending Michigan State University, and I'm studying psychology. I'm on my way to becoming a therapist. My grandparents paid for all of my tuition, and they gave me the best childhood they knew how to. I am so thankful for them, and words could never even begin to describe how blessed I am to have them as a part of my life. They put me on the right track and gave me a chance at living a good life. I have a boyfriend now that I've been with for 3 years, and I'm sure he's the one I will marry and start a family with. He's everything I could have dreamed of. I still love my mom, but it hurts me deeply that we never had that close mother and daughter relationship like I've always wanted since I was a little girl. She overdosed and passed away 2 years ago from heroin. So now I will never get that chance to rekindle with her. You might be wondering about my dad by now. Well, he was never in the picture at all. As soon as he found out my mom was pregnant, he left immediately and never spoke to my mom again. I've had to have some serious intensive therapy for everything that has happened in my life. I'm coming back stronger though, than anyone probably would have thought I would have been able to. Life knocks you down sometimes, but you always have to get back up. This happened about 4 years ago. I was babysitting my little brothers while my dad went out for the night. I was 15 at the time and the oldest of the bunch, so I was put in charge. The only one I really had to watch over was my youngest brother. He was 7 at the time. The other two were 11 and 13. They pretty much just hung out together the whole time, like they usually did in their room. My youngest brother Jason, on the other hand, I had to keep a close eye on him. Most of the night he sat in my lap and watched me play video games with my friends online. My dad ordered us pizza, and when it got there, we were all excited. I scraped up a measly $3.50 for a tip, but that was all I could come up with. I figured it was better than nothing. I grabbed the pizza and gathered all of my little brothers to let them know that the pizza was here. We all grabbed our own slices and went back to our rooms. When I got back to my game, one of my friends made a joke and said to make sure I locked my door. He knew I had a bad habit of forgetting, so I think he was just being thoughtful and looking out for me. I ran back to the front door real quick to make sure I had locked it. Well, it turns out I actually did forget to lock it, so I was happy that he reminded me. I went back to playing video games until maybe 20 minutes or so later, my brothers Zach and Thomas ran to me and told me that there was someone in our backyard. We lived in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, so not only was it a red flag, but it just made it all the way more creepy and scary. It was 9 o'clock too, and my dad wouldn't be home for a few more hours. They told me that a stranger knocked on the window and tried to get Zach, the second youngest of my siblings, to come outside with him. Thomas ran back into the room when he heard Zach talking and shooed the man away. The crazy man actually got Zach to open and unlock the window for him. Had Thomas not have showed up when he did, who knows what else would have happened. I called my dad, but he didn't have a way of getting to us quick enough, so as he was rushing home, he called his friend that lived only a few houses down the road and asked him if he could check on us while he called the police. His name is Joey. Joey was pretty much like an uncle to us, so I trusted him and I let him inside when he got there. We told him what was going on, and that's when he went outside and searched for the man. He found the guy shortly after looking for him, lurking in the shadows, completely hidden under our big pine tree that we had in our backyard. Joey beat the living crap out of him and scared him off. He told him that if he ever came back, that he would make sure he wouldn't be able to leave alive, unless it was through a stretcher to the hospital. Joey said that the man literally peed himself and told Joey that he was there for a drug deal and that it wasn't what it looked like. And get this, the cops actually never even showed up. I think that's why my dad called his friend first, because the police were known to completely abandon ship when it came to calling them and getting them to show up sometimes. At least in our area anyways. Joey waited for my dad to get home before he took off to ensure our safety. My dad never left us home alone again after that night. We ended up moving to a different house about 8 months after that whole incident. That whole entire night was just a complete nightmare. I used to work for Domino's quite some years ago when I was 18. One night I was out making deliveries and I had finally stumbled to the last house of the night. I was ready to get the night over with as it was getting late and I had school the next morning. The house was only a few miles from town and maybe 6 or 7 miles from the Domino's that I worked at. But the property I was delivering to and the atmosphere around the area made me feel like I was in the boonies. When I pulled into the driveway, right away, I felt a shiver fly up my spine. I got this dysphoric-like feeling in my chest too. I just remember feeling very unpleasant. The driveway was a very long and narrow gravel driveway that stretched for probably a quarter mile. It looked like nothing short of a black hole from the end of the driveway before I pulled in. There were tons and tons of trees on both sides of the driveway, and the tree line on each side sat no more than 5 feet from the driveway, making it all the more eerie and dark. I sat at the end of the driveway for a brief moment as I was trying to get myself in check, because if I'm being honest, it was downright creepy and I was spooked. It didn't help that it was almost 10 o'clock at night and I kept hearing something before me in the trees. I realized that it was probably just some sort of animal, but still, it was an uncomfortable situation to be in for me. I remember hearing an owl whistling as well. It's hard to explain the way I felt. I just had such a bad feeling about the whole situation that lied ahead of me. But I had to deliver the pizza. There was no question about it. If I went back to my boss with the pizza and he found out that I didn't deliver it because I was scared, there is no doubt in my mind that he would have fired me. So I reminded myself that I was just overthinking and that everything was going to be okay. That all I had to do was drop the pizza off on the porch, as the customer already paid for it online, along with the tip. As I crept my way down the driveway and I got closer to the house, I saw a man sitting on the front porch, smoking a cigarette. The only light I could see that was coming from the house was the outside porch light, and the man was sitting directly under it. He hit his cigarette one last time and started walking over to me. As I was gathering his food and drinks, he had already made it to my car by the time I stepped out. "Hello, sir, how are you?" "I got here as quick as I could," I said. Then the man stared at me for what felt like way longer than he did, with a very irritated look on his face. He asked me why I was sitting at the end of his driveway for 5 minutes, and I sort of tripped over my words as he caught me off guard. At this point, he was standing directly in front of me and he ripped the pizza from my hands. Then he started complaining about how the pizza was cold. I was confused on how he knew I was sitting at the end of the driveway for a few minutes, as there is no way he could have saw me from the porch. Thinking about it now, I suppose he could have heard me, or maybe he had cameras that surveillance his property. But in the moment, I was thinking on my feet, and I didn't want to upset the customer further. I just really wanted to get out of there. So I told him that I had no clue what he was talking about. The look on his face became even more distraught when I said that, and he told me that he hates liars. Then I noticed someone who came from the inside of the house that was walking in our direction, and then 2 others who were walking from the backside of the house towards us as well. My adrenaline amped up to 1,000, and at this point, it was either fight or flight. I knew for a fact that something bad was going to happen if I didn't get out of there. I sat the rest of the food down, along with the 2-liter that he ordered, and I ran to the driver's side door so I could speed away and get the hell out of there. But as soon as I opened the car door, one of the guys grabbed my head and smashed it on the car window, and I fell to the ground. Then the man made me hand my wallet and phone over. They told me to get out of here and that if I told anybody, like the police, about what happened, that they would come for me and my family. They had my ID, so they knew where I lived, and that's just not something I wanted to risk. Luckily, I only had about $70 in my wallet. The rest of my money was in my bank account, so as soon as I got home, I asked to borrow my girlfriend's phone. I called the 24/7 hotline number to cancel all of my cards and report them stolen. That way they wouldn't be able to have access to my money. I got a new ID and everything was okay. For anyone reading this that does any sort of delivery driving, at night especially, please stay safe out there and listen to your gut no matter what. It might just save your life. It was a cold and windy night, and I was out working. I used to work as a pizza delivery driver part-time when I first got out of school. I needed money really bad, and delivering pizza was a relatively easy thing to do. And at the time, I was actually quite happy with the amount of money I was getting. It wasn't much, but it was more than enough at the time, as I still lived with my parents, and the only thing I had to pay for was my phone bill. Anyways, it was getting late, and this was probably going to be my last delivery of the night, depending on how fast I could get it done, that is. When I arrived at the house, I walked up to the front steps and I knocked on the door. There was nothing unusual going on just yet, They had the main door wide open, with the screen door cracked open as well. I waited for about a solid minute, and I politely knocked again. This time though, a little bit louder. I wanted to be sure that they heard me this time. I heard music playing in the background, so I was thinking that they probably just didn't hear me. I waited for another minute or so, but still, nobody came to the door. I knocked 2 more times with about a minute between each time, and still, no answer. I was in shock, as this wasn't something that happened to me frequently. Usually when I arrived at a house and I knocked on the door, the customer would be there in less than a minute. Just as I was about to knock for the last time, I noticed a piece of paper that had been stuck in between the door. I decided to grab it and read it. The piece of paper said, "Please deliver the pizza to the back door and knock loud and hard," with a smiley face on it. Right away, I picked that up as a red flag, but at the same time, I convinced myself I was overthinking. I almost just left the pizza on their front porch, but I didn't want them calling and complaining to the store about it being cold when they finally found the pizza. What the hell, I'll just do it. At that point, I had been waiting for almost 10 minutes, and I was genuinely starting to get irritated. As I made my way around the house, the closer I got to the back door, the louder the music became, and that's when I noticed they were having a little campfire outside. However, there was nobody outside, so I slowly walked up the back patio steps, and I knocked on the door sort of hard, just like the paper had said to do. As I waited for somebody to come to the door, I was growing more and more impatient. I was just about to say screw it and just leave the pizza on the deck and get the hell out of there. But out of nowhere, I heard a loud noise in the house, and briefly after that I heard screaming, from both a woman and a man. It sounded like they were getting into it with each other pretty bad, and I wasn't sure what to do. I waited for a few minutes and the screaming continued. It was only getting worse as time went on, and I was really starting to get concerned. It really seemed like someone was getting hurt in there. More than likely, the man was physically assaulting the woman, and that's what it sounded like to me. Right as I was about to call the police, the man came running over to the back door and he grabbed the pizza from me. And he also apologized to me and said that he was sorry for the wait. I told him it was no big deal, and I asked him if everything was okay. He was trying his best to act normal, but the way he gave me a response, and from what I was hearing a few minutes prior, I knew he was lying to my face, right through his teeth. "Look man, here's $50, please just accept my money and go. What's going on here is between me and her, and it's none of your concern." I then looked at him with a really unsettling look, and I told him that I didn't want his money, and I started walking away. Already knowing that in the back of my head, I was going to call the police when I got in my car. When I made it back to my car in the driveway, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the woman came storming outside in my direction and started begging for help. She had been beaten so horribly you would not believe it. Both of her eyes were so swelled up that you could barely even see her left eye at all. She was crying and she had bruises all over her body, and she was bleeding from her nose and her stomach. She told me that he had sliced her stomach with a knife and that he threatened her with a gun. She said she managed to get away from him by hitting him in the head with a hammer. She then ran to the other side of my car and got in the passenger seat and told me to drive off. She was freaking out and screaming, telling me that we needed to leave before he came out there and killed us both. She was literally begging and screaming that I helped her get out of there. So we drove off and she called the police using my phone. I took her with me back to my work, and my boss was very understanding after I told him the situation. I ended up quitting the very next day though, as it was just too much for me to cope with. I thought that I was better off looking for a different job, something that would be safer, you know. The woman who I rescued, Angela, called the police with my phone as soon as she got in the car, like I said. But by the time the cops arrived, Tom was dead. The man killed himself by shooting himself in the head. Tom had been abusing Angela for years, and she had no way of escaping it. She didn't have a phone or any friends in the area, and he had been keeping complete control over her for the past 2 years. Apparently she was pregnant, and Tom didn't want to be a father yet, and that's what started the argument in the first place. He most definitely tried to kill the baby, but to no avail. Angela and I now are good friends, and we have each other on Facebook. I reached out to her recently to ask her how things were going, and she said she couldn't be happier and that she's in a new relationship with someone that truly loves her and cares for her. She even sent me some pictures of her and her daughter, and they seem to be in a much better spot now, which makes me happy. I worked as a pizza delivery driver at my local pizzeria for a decent amount of time in my late teenage years. It was almost 11 o'clock at night, and my manager asked me if I could do this one last delivery for the night, even though we usually wouldn't do deliveries past 10:30. It was a Saturday night, and we were much busier than usual, so I agreed. After all, I really couldn't have told him no, even if I wanted to. I got in my old beat-up 2008 Pontiac Grand Prix, and I turned some music on to help me stay awake, as I was getting really tired, and I was just ready to go the hell home. I live in a small town, so I knew the area very well, like the back of my hand. Ironically enough, I've actually never delivered around this area before. It was a few miles out of town, and I'm positive it would have technically been a different jurisdiction, or at the very least, a whole different township. As I was getting closer to the house, I realized how unfamiliar the area was, but it didn't bother me much. When I got there, my GPS told me I had arrived, but I was still about a quarter mile away from the house. I was really confused, so I kept driving until I saw the next house. I was literally in the middle of nowhere, so I figured it was just the GPS being glitchy or whatever. Like I said, I stopped at the next house, hoping that it would be the correct address. I pulled into the driveway, but the driveway was super long, and I didn't want to drive all the way up to the house and have it be a total stranger that didn't even order a pizza. So I stepped out of my car and I looked to see if there was an address on the mailbox, and there was. It was definitely the address I had in my GPS, so that gave me a lot of relief. I headed down the driveway slowly, and I don't know why, but I parked my car about halfway up the driveway, and I walked the rest of the way up to the house. I knocked on the door and I waited for a few minutes, but nobody answered. I knocked once more and waited, and still, no answer. I was upset because that meant I pretty much just wasted all that time for nothing, because my job really relied on tips. I put the pizza on their front porch and I started walking back to my car. I picked up my pace a bit because it was really dark on their property and they didn't have any of the outside lights on, so I had no source of light whatsoever. Before I got to my car, as I was walking, I started hearing footsteps that sounded like it was coming from the back of the house. I could hear the leaves crunching and the sticks snapping with every step that they took. I didn't know who or what it was, but I really didn't want to stay long enough to find out. I got back in my car and I started it, and I slowly started backing out. There wasn't really any room for me to do a U-turn unless I were to drive all the way up the driveway and turn around, and I really didn't want to do that. Anyways, as I was backing up, I was too busy looking behind me to make sure I was following along the driveway. But when I turned my head back around, there was a man that had some sort of wolf mask on, and he was chasing me. I practically floored it immediately as he was running quite fast, and I didn't want him catching up to me. The driveway had a decent sized curve to it, and I sort of slid off the gravel and I hit the mailbox, and I almost ran straight into the ditch. The man caught up to me and he tried to open the passenger side door, but I had locked it before he could open it. And then I drove off. I drove back to the restaurant, all while trying to figure out what I should do and if I should call the police or not, but I chose not to. I didn't tell anyone at work about what happened either. I was worried they wouldn't believe me and that my boss would think I made up a story. to cover up the fact that I hit their mailbox and completely knocked it over. The strangest thing about this story is I never heard anything afterwards. I kind of thought that someone would call and complain to the restaurant about me hitting the mailbox. But the more that time goes on, the more I realize that I don't think the man with the mask lived there. And I had a feeling that the house was either vacant or foreclosed, or the people that lived there just simply weren't home. Either way, I'm almost 100% positive that the man with the wolf mask didn't order a pizza with the intentions of eating it. I think he had a more devious plan. A few weeks ago, my neighbor asked me to dog sit at their house while they went out of town for a few days. My neighbor is a single woman who lives alone, and she jokingly told me that she adopted a dog whose name is Bella so she could have scary dog privilege. Which was funny because the dog is completely blind. However, Bella had a great sense of direction around her house and could use her other senses quite well. Still, the owner didn't normally go on trips like this, as she hated tearing Bella away from her familiar territory and couldn't leave her alone either because of some abandonment issues. But in this case, there was a funeral that she had to go to, so that's where I came in. I was basically supposed to live at her house for 3 days and 2 nights to make sure the dog was getting all the attention she needed, plus the usual dog sitting tasks. Bella herself was a large boxer with a lot of energy, and despite the blindness, she was a very sweet and well-mannered dog. My neighbor trusted me since she knew my parents, and aside from asking that I spend as much time with Bella as I could, the only other major thing she pointed out was that her bedroom door had to stay shut while she was gone. The first day went perfectly fine. I got Bella to feel pretty comfortable around me, and I did everything I was supposed to. I ended up falling asleep on the couch with Bella next to me. I was in the house all throughout the next morning too, until around lunchtime when my friends invited me to hang out for the day. I hadn't left the house at all yet, so I figured I could be away for a few hours and everything would be alright. My friends picked me up from the house, as only one of us had a car at the time. Then we hung out until sunset. They wanted to stay out late, but I made them take me back so I wouldn't have a guilty conscience about abandoning Bella. I'd only been away for a few hours, but as soon as I got back into the house, I felt like I screwed up. Bella was acting completely different, like barking and growling and backing away from me. I figured this was her abandonment issues acting up, and I did the best I could to console her and regain her trust. Unfortunately, nothing I did seemed to put her at ease. She had no interest in eating her dinner, no response to the leash, and no willingness to approach me even when I called her name with treats in my hand. I decided to sit on the couch and watch TV until she calmed down, but several minutes later, Bella was acting the same way again. I noticed she seemed to be staring down the hallway even though she couldn't see. Like she could sense something from that direction that was making her growl. I thought if I explored that area for her, then she would calm down. So I walked down to the end of the hall. Bella followed me halfway, but she stopped right before her owner's bedroom door. She sniffed under the door for a few seconds, then out of nowhere, she went back to being just as aggressive as she was when I first walked in, barking and posturing. I knew I wasn't supposed to open that door, but I also knew that Bella wouldn't calm down until she checked it out. Reluctantly, I turned the handle and cracked the door open. Bella pushed past right away and went a few steps into the bedroom, then became quiet and stopped to sniff the air intensely. Gradually, she inched closer to the bed, then stuck her snout underneath it. Immediately, she jumped back and started snarling and chomping at the air in front of her. All of the hairs on her body were sticking up. My stomach began to churn. I remember a lump forming in my throat too, as I tried to call out to whatever Bella thought was there. Hey, is anybody there? You better not be, I swear. There was no reply, just more of Bella's barking. I knew I had to look. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone's flashlight, got down on my hands and knees, and looked under the bed from the doorway. A pair of human eyes glared back at me. Chills ran through my body as my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. I stood up, grabbed Bella, and carried her out of the room, slammed the door behind me, and locked us in the spare bedroom. I called the police that instant, then waited anxiously for them to arrive. A few minutes later they came, but the intruder had already fled the same way they broke in, through the bedroom window. Clearly, whoever they were, they thought the house would be empty, They had planned to hide until they could ambush the owner when she got back. Unfortunately, since I didn't get a good look at their face, the police weren't able to mount a successful search. Obviously, due to the fact that their would-be attacker is still on the loose, my neighbor has purchased a thorough security system for their home. Hopefully there's never a part 2 to this story. I wanted to earn some extra spending money so I could go out and have fun more often. So I looked around on Facebook Marketplace for odd jobs in my neighborhood, back when you could still post jobs on Facebook. After mowing a few lawns, I wanted to do something less strenuous, and that's when I found an opportunity to dog sit for a guy for just a single night and make $50. I contacted the man for the details, then a few days later when he said he needed to go out of town overnight, I met him at the house. It was an older house, probably built in the 70s. The lawn was overgrown and the paint was chipping, but other than that, it didn't look like it was about to fall apart or anything. When I met the man at the door, I was taken aback by how tall he was. Probably 6'6", where I only stand about 5'10". He looked like he was built in the 70s too, with long, greasy gray hair and a skunky smell to him, but pretty chill overall. He introduced me to his dogs, 2 rambunctious Rottweiler sisters. He warned me that his dogs would probably go a little crazy for missing him, but he just wanted me to make sure they didn't tear the house up. All I had to do was leave food and water out for them and let them out into the backyard every few hours. Other than that, I could make myself at home. After only talking for a few minutes, the owner left. Immediately, I started getting comfortable and looking around the house. It was kind of a mess. The man clearly lived alone and had stopped caring a long time ago. He probably inherited the house from his parents and had just never moved. I decided I would just spend the night on the couch, and I started to burn away the hours watching TV. The dogs never seemed like they fully trusted me, but they weren't aggressive either, just unsure and distant. I was glad they weren't mean, because I honestly didn't think I could control 2 fully grown Rottweilers if I had to. However, a few hours into the night, their demeanor changed. They never settled into bed, and as the minutes passed, they were growing more and more restless. I got up to let them out into the backyard, but strangely, as I stood from the couch, they rushed over to the front door instead. I was confused by this, as their owner said he never walked them, so why did they want to go to the front door? They were whining and couldn't sit still, wagging their tails like they expected somebody to open it and come through. When that thought crossed my mind, I felt a little chill. I was suddenly alert. I slowly walked up to the door and checked through the peephole, breathing a sigh of relief when I didn't see anyone. I teased the dogs for being silly and I called them to go outside in the backyard. I opened the sliding glass door and called them again until they reluctantly sauntered off into the yard. I watched them for a moment before closing the door to leave them out there for a few minutes, while I went to the bathroom myself. This bathroom had a small window facing the backyard with that kind of glass that's frosted so you can't see through it clearly. But there was still some light coming through the motion-activated lights outside. I was standing in front of the toilet, looking off into no particular direction, when I saw a shadow walk across the window. It startled me so bad that I flinched and got piss all over the toilet seat. I finished up early and I left the mess for a moment, knowing I needed to check that out. I wasn't sure that it was a person, but it kind of looked like one. This being the second weird thing to have happened within a few minutes, I preemptively dialed 911 as I walked back to the sliding glass door and looked into the yard, trying to see if there was anybody snooping around without opening the door. There weren't any trees outside that bathroom window, and it was too tall for it to have been a dog. So my suspicions seemed to be snowballing into a worst-case scenario coming true. I let the call to 911 go through, and I quietly told them what was going on. I'm alone in an unfamiliar house, dog sitting, and I think somebody is trying to break into the house because they think nobody is home. I then had enough time to whisper the address to them before I heard a noise come from the inside of the house. It sounded like the garage. I told the operator to hold on, and I put my phone in my pocket. I remember them urging me at the last second not to go investigating anything, but I felt like I knew what I was doing. I crept up to the door into the garage and put my ear up against it, but I didn't hear anything else. I wanted to check it visually though, so I slowly opened the door. Suddenly, the doorknob was ripped out of my hand and it flew open. The owner of the house was towering over me in the doorway, holding a huge knife. Before I had time to react, he grabbed me by the collar and yanked me over so that my face was within an inch of the blade. Then he started dragging me into the garage and over to the door into the cellar. "Get in there," he said. And so I did, not knowing what else I could do. I was now climbing down into the horrifying darkness of the cellar with the man holding me at knife point a mere step behind me. When I got to the bottom, I strained to see, but there wasn't much down there. Just a bunch of junk piled up in the corners, and in the middle, a camera on a tripod. Out of nowhere, I was kicked in the back and I fell to the ground. "Don't get up," he said. The man commanded me as he walked over to the tripod and turned on the camera, readjusting it so it pointed at me. "It's time for you to get paid," he said. $50, right? I was too scared to say anything back. All I could do was nod. Then he grabbed a bag full of coins from a nearby shelf, opened it, then poured the entire thing on the ground in front of me. It looked to be $50 alright, but its entirety was in quarters. "Now pick it up," he said. I followed the command, starting to pick up each one by hand. No, not with your hands, pick them up with your mouth. And make sure the camera sees. I let out a whimper as the tears of humiliation and fear started to well up, but I had no other choice. This guy was way too big for me to fight. I got on my knees and I bent over, kissing the filthy cellar floor until I managed to get one of the quarters between my teeth. At that point, confused and dreading what I knew he would say next, I looked up to him as if I asked, "What now?" "Now eat them," was his response. I didn't think my heart could sink any lower into my stomach, but in that moment it did. I whimpered again and let the quarter fall back onto my tongue. Then I forced myself to swallow it, nearly gagging as it went down. I looked up at the man again, about to plead with him to stop all of this, but he wasn't about that. "Keep going until they're all gone. You want to get paid, don't you?" There was nothing I could do to challenge him. I just had to wait and hope that help would come. I didn't forget that my phone was still on with 911 in my pocket, but I had no idea how long it would take for them to get there. In truth, I think I was forced to eat about $10 worth of quarters before the cops started to bust into the house. As soon as the homeowner heard them coming, he turned tail and ran. It was too late though. They had the whole house surrounded and they got him right away. Then they eventually found me in the cellar, dry heaving wretchedly and sobbing like a pitiful mess. Swallowing one quarter is fine, maybe. That'll pass through. 40 quarters though, that's a different story. I had to get taken to the hospital and put to sleep for surgery so they could clear the blockage. I was still finding change in the toilet bowl for weeks after that, which tends to put an unfortunate note of humor on my trauma from the experience. But I guess I can only cry about it or laugh about it, and I know which one I'd rather do. After all, I'm only alive because that dinosaur forgot how cell phones work. I used to have a great side gig with a family friend where I would walk her dog for her every night, but then it all got ruined the other day. The family friend is an older woman who lives in a high-rise apartment in the downtown area of where I live. And I live in a house in one of the nearby suburbs, so it's an easy job for a quick couple of bucks. My boss, which I say lightly as it was a chill job, can't see very well at night now that she's gotten old, so I would show up around 8 p.m. to get the dog out for one last walk before they went to bed. The dog is just one of those tiny poodle things that you'd expect an old lady to have, so it was super easy to walk. The only problem is that I have to watch out for the sketchy people that come out of the woodwork after dark. My boss always stressed to me that I should be super careful because I'm a young girl walking around by myself, and I would just shrug it off and say I'd be fine. However, I know now that it was a serious warning, because I was fine right up until the moment that I wasn't. It started out like any other night. I walked the dog over to the little park across the street so it could wander around and do its thing. But at some point, I noticed there was a sketchy man on the other side of the park, standing in a dark spot beneath a tree. He was looking at me. I expected him to look away, but he didn't. He just kept staring. He was almost 100 feet away, but it still freaked me out. I pretended not to notice him still staring at me while I gave the dog another couple seconds to do its business, getting ready to cut the walk short. Then I saw out of the corner of my eye that the man was walking towards me. I quickly picked the dog up and started power walking for the door back into the high-rise. I kept looking over my shoulder and seeing that he was still following me, and he was even getting closer. I caught glimpses of his face. His eyes were fixated on me and his jaw was clenched. I picked up my pace and finally made it to the door. I scanned my key fob to get in and I rushed inside, hoping that the door would automatically lock before he got there. But a fraction of a second before the lock re-engaged, he swung the door wide open, then walked right in. I swore inside my head and I jammed the button to call the elevator. Then I stared at the ground in front of me, hoping that anybody would show up. He pretended to wait for the elevator, except he wouldn't take his eyes off me and he kept taking steps closer. I refused to make eye contact, but I could still see him. He was your typical cracked out hobo. You know, the scary ones that twitch and scream at people when they walk by. And I could smell the filth he was covered in. There was no way that he lived in that building, but he had the nerve to ask me if I did. "Hey, do you live here?" I ignored him. Just a few moments later, the elevator arrived and I stepped on absent-mindedly. Of course, he followed right after. I pressed the button for the floor I wanted to go to as he kept trying to talk to me. "Oh, that's my floor too. We could be neighbors. Do you live alone?" When he asked that, I knew I was in serious danger. My heart was pounding. It was an agonizing 30 seconds, which I spent praying to God he wouldn't try anything in the elevator. When it stopped, and as I walked out, the man followed. But thankfully, I didn't have to go far. My boss's apartment was the first one by the side elevator, so when I got to the door, I did the only thing I could think of and I started pounding on the door like I was the police. I needed to somehow warn my boss that something was wrong when she came to the door. And I was hoping that banging my fist against it non-stop would be enough. I could feel the stalker inching closer and closer behind me. It must have been at the last possible second before he grabbed me when my boss finally came to the door. She opened it just a crack and glared through the window with a perplexed look on her face, and then she saw me, and then the guy. And suddenly, she switched up and opened the door the entire way and pulled out a gun. One of those cute little purse pistols, but like still a full-on gun, and it did the trick. The guy saw I wasn't alone, and the person I was with was showing them the inside of a barrel, and his cracked out crazy mind didn't even think about the fact it was an old lady. He just ran like hell and disappeared down the stairwell. Afterwards, my boss ushered me inside of her apartment and started to laugh, telling me that the thing hadn't been loaded in 20 years, but she keeps it by the door for just this sort of occasion. Gotta love old-fashioned Southerners for that. I'm never gonna work for her again though, not after what happened.